Hey everyone, my name is Dillon Gonzalez. I'm the editorial director for GeekVibesNation.com and also a co-host of the Home Dance Film Festival podcast, and I am thrilled to be here with you once again to discuss one of my absolute favorite labels, the Warner Archive. Now, this is my latest installment of Exploring the Warner Archive, where I spotlight some of the new and older titles from the Warner Archive I think should be on your radar. So I'm going to start out with a couple of titles that just came out in August, and then I'm going to segue into some older titles that maybe you missed whenever they first came out years ago, and maybe you just need another shot at them. So my first title is Gay Purr-ee, which I always love whenever Warner Archive can do some feature animation. There's not very many titles on Blu-ray that are feature films, but we've been getting this one and Cats Don't Dance next month, which I'm very excited about. And they always do a really great job with their animation. So Gay Purr-ee is interesting because it is one of the final film roles from Judy Garland. She voices the lead cat Musette. And it's a very simple story. It's very brief. It's like an hour and 25 minutes long. And it's just a story of this French kitty who's lives in the country, who has dreams of going to the big city and living the life. She's not doesn't want to be contained to a country lifestyle, and she has her friends and a potential suitor in the country who do not want to see her leave, but she goes off on her own. But whenever she's there, it kind of gets pretty wild. She kind of gets swept up in this kind of gang of other cats, and it gets it's not too dark for children, but basically she's almost being trafficked to America, and it's really wild. But along the way, there's some songs and antics and all that good stuff that you want from an animated film. There's some very amusing moments. It's not a all-time classic, but it's a really well animated, beautiful, funny, very strange movie, like an artifact from this time. And this has Chuck Jones fingerprints all over this as well. Overall, I think it's a pretty solid movie. I hope they keep doing more animated features and their TV series, their Hanna-Barbera stuff, or anything else like Popeye, Tom and Jerry, anything like that. I love it all, and I want it all. So keep on supporting their animated stuff. So maybe they'll do even more. This comes from a 4K scan of the original camera negative, and it looks spectacular. All the natural cell animation cells stuff, it's been cleaned up, but it keeps all of its organic qualities that you want to see. So it's has organic film grain, but not any of the egregious specks of dust or scratches or anything like that. It's been cleaned up very well. It sounds very good. All these songs come out through very well. Judy Garland's voice sounds very full and rich and just really wonderful. This includes, I believe, three cartoon shorts, and some brief demos of some songs from Judy Garland, which is a nice little treat, a historical treat for Judy Garland fans. So some extra cartoon shorts and just a really fun, engaging feature makes Gay Purr-ee a recommended watch. My other title from August, which if you want the full slate, we've talked about some of these titles already on our full-length Video Attic episodes I do with my colleague Michael Vaughn. If you want to see some more of those, I'll link to those in the description. There's just a few others I wanted to cover. So the next one is The Life of Emile Zola. And this has the distinction of being the first Warner Brothers film to win Best Picture, which I think is pretty cool, and they're very proud of it. So this is their 100-year anniversary, so they wanted to make sure to give this title the A-list treatment, and boy did they. But before I talk about that, I wanted to talk about the movie itself, which is a very entertaining kind of historical drama set in France. It's about a French writer. He's kind of a struggling writer at first, and he eventually gets into the newspaper business, and he's kind of in the business of actually telling the truth and getting actual factual stories out to the public at large. So he's known as a voice of the people, and really championing the people's rights. And then at one point, there's like this military cover-up where someone really screwed the pooch, and instead of like taking responsibility and stuff, they kind of scapegoated this one particular person who's going to trial. And there's all this stuff with like reputations of like if Emile Zola, who's like reporting with the actual truth, is like liable for spreading narratives that are counter to what the actual like military says. And so it's kind of all it's this tale of like a military power trying to quash like basically the freedom of the press, and like kind of disgrace and discredit this newspaper man. So it's just it turns into a very interesting legal drama, especially like there's a courtroom intrigue for a good 30 or so minutes near this. It's not the like egregiously long movie. It's only an hour and 56 minutes, but it uses its time very well to kind of build up the character of Emile Zola, where he is within the country, and then kind of like how the powers that be are trying to kind of dissuade the country from the truth. And it all comes together very well. I understand why it won the Best Picture back in this day. And this has been treated very well. It comes from a 4K restoration of the original camera negative. It looks very nice. The sound holds up very well too. There's no audio dropouts or anything of that sort. This has actually I believe it's a 30-minute radio play in which actor Paul Mooney reprises his role and does the radio adaptation from the Lux Radio Theater, which is always a fun addition. There's also 2 additional shorts on here. So I love that Warner Archive usually tries to include at least a couple shorts if they're not going to include anything else. So they treated this one very well. And so if you're interested in Warner history, this is a big part with their Oscar win. But if you're just interested in also good movies, The Life of Emile Zola, it does its job. Moving on to some older titles, it's interesting because, as I mentioned, there's some other August titles, including an Elvis title called Spin Out, which my colleague Michael Vaughn talked about. But to complement that, I'm not going to talk about Spin Out, but I'm going to talk about another Elvis release, just kind of in the spirit of things. This is Elvis the Way It Is, and this is interesting to note that Warner Archive, it's not simply always new restorations or anything like that. This is actually a case of them reissuing a title that had went out of print before that was released by Warner Home Video. I know they're like similar names, but they're different kind of branches of the same company. Warner Home Video is kind of like the main branch, and Warner Archives more of the boutique branch where they're doing like the big restorations and like getting all the from the vault stuff basically. So this was released by Warner Home Video probably about 2014 if I'm not mistaken, and that was released in a nice digibook, but it went out of print, and now Warner Archive came to the rescue to make sure it was still in print. So now you get Elvis the Way It Is. It's not a new disc or anything, but it does include both of the original disc and pretty decent price. For those who have not seen it, this is a documentary, which there are actually 2 versions of this. There's the original theatrical version, which is included as a DVD on this, and then there's a restored version, which was released about, I believe, in the 90s. It was restored and kind of repurposes some of the footage and excises some of the documentary footage from the theatrical cut. Mostly, I think they excise some of the fan interactions. I kind of cut all of that, and I kind of give you a deeper dive into Elvis at this point in his life, which is in the 1970s, when he's kind of making his comeback during his Las Vegas residency. There is a small bit, probably about 20 minutes, where you see Elvis kind of rehearsing for this residency, interacting with his bandmates, and just having some like interesting like everyday moments, and it's like interesting to see Elvis as a person in like kind of this documentary footage, just kind of free from like being on all the time, which is like a really cool part of the movie. But the majority of the movie is him on stage during his residency, just like doing all the iconic songs that you love, having a little bit of stage banter, a little bit of silliness. This all kind of comes together very well. One thing I wanted to note, it was pretty insane to watch this. He kisses so many women throughout this performance. It's insane, because women just would keep coming up to the like the front of the stage, and he would oblige them and like give them a kiss. And I was just like, Elvis had to kiss at least probably 50 plus women in this movie, and they just kept coming up, and he would like be like singing and then take just like a brief second, kiss them, and then just like keep on singing. And just like so many women got smooches, so good for them, I guess. Like this was just a totally different time. I was remarking to my wife, who I was watching this with, I was like, there is no way that security would allow that today. It's just like the amount of interaction with the fans is wild. But it's a very interesting movie, and it's a pretty good presentation. Like I said, this is some older discs from Warner Home Video, but they did a very good job that time. The Blu-ray looks very nice. There's still like kind of like the nice original graininess of the documentary footage, but it's not like noisy or anything like that. The black levels hold up very well. There's nice like lush colors within the stage and the lighting. Overall, I think this is a really good effort from the team at Warner, and I'm glad that Warner Archive did rescue it from being out of print and is allowing audiences to see this once again. You do get both of the original discs, just in like this packaging that kind of lines up with the Warner Archive branding. So if you're an Elvis fan, I think it's probably an essential watch. You should definitely pick it up. If you do not have it yet, make sure you get it. Going on to more traditional fare, this has been restored from Warner Archive. I believe the rest of these have been kind of hands-on Warner Archive for the rest of it. This next one is Kentucky Kernels, featuring Burt Wheeler and Robert Woolsey, which whenever this was announced, I had never heard of this team, and a lot of the people in the comments sections I was reading weren't super familiar with them either. This is kind of like a vaudeville era team, kind of in the vein of like Abbott and Costello, that never really got to the same like stardom as them, but they are pretty fun, and I would be interested in having more Wheeler and Woolsey films. This is a very spry film. It's only an hour and 15 minutes long, and it involves the pair. They are playing out-of-work vaudeville actors, and through circumstances, they kind of come into guardianship of a young boy played by Spanky McFarlane from The Little Rascals. Which, if you're interested in The Little Rascals, this is just a quick diversion. Make sure to check out the Classic Flicks releases of all the Little Rascals shorts. They're amazing. Highly recommend that. But in the story of Kentucky Kernels, they come into guardianship of Spanky, and they believe that he potentially is going to inherit this large fortune in Kentucky, or like this land. But this happens to be right in like the middle of this kind of like Hatfield and McCoy's-esque family feud, and like hilarity ensues of just like them getting in the middle of this family feud. There's gunfire, there's like misunderstandings. It's wild, it's fun, it's breezy. Like I said, 75 minutes. And if you just like kind of like those Abbott and Costello-esque like escapades where it's just like an high concept like comedy feature, I think this fits right in kind of to that mold. And this release is very good. It is a 4K scan of the original camera negative, and this includes 3 cartoons. So if you're a cartoon fan, there's some nice cartoons in this, and the sound quality holds up very well also. So overall, very good release for Kentucky Kernels. Heading to more of a newer title for Warner Archive, at least. This was released in the late 80s. This is Reversal of Fortune, which is based on a real-life criminal case from the 80s that was presided over by Alan Dershowitz, which this is an actor playing him, and played by Ron Silver. And this kind of like was a case that had national headlines where it's this high society family, this European individual played by Jeremy Irons, who won the Best Actor Academy Award for this. At the beginning of the film, it is known that his wife, played by Glenn Close, the great Glenn Close, is in a coma, and he is like purported to have potentially tried to kill her, and he has already gone through some trials, and everyone believes that he did it. He got convicted, but he has grounds for an appeal that he wants Alan to take over. And while Alan may not believe that he is necessarily innocent, he believes in the law, and he believes that this he believes in fighting for the letter of the law, because if you overlook one aspect of the law, what good is the rest of it, basically? And he has this conversation a lot with his students who are helping him along with his case, trying to prove his case. So this is a nice legal thriller, but throughout you get kind of flashbacks to different accounts of the different versions of the story, what may have happened, why he looks so guilty, whether or not it's not. You cannot say definitively whether he did it or not. You may draw some conclusions once you get to the end of this, but if you like a legal thriller, I think this will kind of scratch that itch. It's pretty fun. It's great performances. And I had never heard of this story before, but it gets me interested to kind of delve more into what actually happened in real life. I do know that I won't spoil it. If you if you've never heard of this story either, you can kind of see where this got to until the movie, and then kind of read up on it afterwards. But it is a really good release. This comes from a new master, and this does include a commentary track, which was ported over from a previously released DVD with director Babette Schroeder. So that's cool. Not very many Warner Archive Blu-rays have a commentary track, so it's always a treat whenever they do have it. So Reversal of Fortune, if you like legal thrillers, check it out. Sticking more into the modern day, Warner Archive, modern being the 90s, this is Showdown in Little Tokyo. This is just like a classic kind of, I would say buddy cop, but they're not cops necessarily, but buddy crime movie with Dolph Lundgren and the late Brandon Lee. It's interesting because Dolph Lundgren plays the kind of person who is really into kind of Eastern like martial arts, like philosophy, and he's living in the West, but he's learned all these martial arts philosophies from his time in the East, and he kind of has like this really unique relationship with it. And then Brandon Lee, he is more of like a valley guy who is always like doing quippy things, or saying quippy things, and just kind of not taking things seriously. But they both kind of get involved in this kind of like gangland, kind of not strictly Yakuza, but like gangster plight. So it's there's also Tia Carrera, who people might know best from Wayne's World. She is in this, and she has a very blatant body double for her nude scenes, which I find charming, just like in its throwback like action movie qualities. But this is not reinventing the wheel, but if you kind of like those dumb martial arts movies, gangster like crime movies from like the 80s and 90s, this is a very breezy one. It's only an hour and 18 minutes, so it goes by very quickly. But there's some good shootouts, some good one-liners, and it delivers on that level. It's not high art, but it does what you want. People who love the genre, it does what you want it to do. This comes from a 2K scan of the inner positive, which holds up very well. It's not perfect. There's some like minor inconsistencies here and there, mostly in like the grain density, but overall holds up very well. There are no special features besides the trailer, but the feature itself is worth it if you're a fan of the genre. So, Showdown in Little Tokyo, like I said, if you're a Dolph Lundgren fan, pick it up. If you're a Brandon Lee fan, pick it up. If you don't like this genre, if you're more of like a classic film fan, may not be for you, but Warner Archive, they have something for everyone. I have an interesting pair of titles. I'm going to go in back to back. This is two presidential leaning features. The first one is Sunrise at Campobello, which is about FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, and pretty much goes from his time where he first starts being like stricken with polio and like losing the function of his legs and everything, and like kind of building himself back up to eventually getting back like fully into politics and like getting him on his lead up to the presidency. So it's him dealing with his affliction, how it affects his family, how it affects his morale, all this stuff. It's an epic movie. This actually has like a brief intermission. It's 2 hours and 23 minutes long, but it keeps your attention pretty well throughout. I like how it takes a little bit of time to ease you into the family and kind of know all the dynamics between the children and like his mother and his wife Eleanor, who's played by the great Greer Garson. I love her. Franklin is played by Ralph Bellamy. He does a really nice job as well, but Greer Garson, I think, really steals the show, for me at least. It's not like a completely reinvention of like the biopic structure, but I like that it kind of does focus pretty much strictly on this like brief period before like he became president, and just kind of how he's overcoming his medical maladies, and how he's not really like, despite everything that's against him, he's not going to let it keep him down, and just like the love that he has for his wife and how she's always supporting him. And from what I know of history, it probably does kind of skirt over some small issues and stuff. I mean, maybe Eleanor could have been a little bit more fleshed out besides just being like a supportive wife, but I do like that she is still given a platform to like show how she was out on the campaign trail for him, like speaking on different issues and like really being an individual of her own, and besides just being like the caretaker to Franklin. So Sunrise at Campobello, it's a pretty fun movie. This comes from a new restoration. There are no special features besides a trailer, but this restoration looks super nice. Nice rich colors, nice natural grain. It's a really great release. If you're a fan of like these types of like kind of biopic type movies, this one's a lot of fun. Less effective, but still entertaining, and I'll explain it here in a little bit, is Tennessee Johnson, about Andrew Johnson, who is played by Van Heflin, and this was particular of interest to me because I'm located in Tennessee, and the thing about this movie is they try to portray Johnson as not as problematic as he very obviously was, if you know anything about history, especially in regard to like slavery and stuff. He does mention some of this stuff, but they try to kind of not exactly justify it, but kind of be like, but he had these progressive notions, like, or he was right in this way, or like, let's just kind of forget that he said this, did this, and kind of gave him kind of like a moral rewrite within the story, especially when it came to his temper, which he did have a huge temper. And they do kind of just completely fabricate a lot of the stuff near the end of this movie, including some inspiring speeches that just never happened. So if you're coming for accuracy, Tennessee Johnson is just a complete failure. If you're coming for entertainment, it's a very entertaining feature. But you kind of have to go into it just like as if you know nothing about history, or else you might just be dripping crazy. But if you like a pretty well done presidential film, like if you pretend he's a fictional president, I think you'll be entertained. Otherwise, you might have some issues with it, like for you history buffs out there. So don't use this. Don't get Tennessee Johnson, kids, and try to pass off a history paper based on watching this. You will flunk out. It'll be awful. But this Blu-ray is really nice. This comes from a 4K scan of the best surviving elements, and this holds up very well. It's that top tier Warner Archive quality that you want. Pretty much most of these titles have come from the last few years of Warner Archive when they really hit their stride. A lot of 4K scans, and this is no different. They do miraculous work, really good sound quality as well. This just has a trailer as well, and but it's still a really great release. If you're a fan of the film, just know, do not come for historical accuracy. You will hate it. One of the films from like kind of the earlier side, besides Showdown in Tokyo, this comes very early from the Warner Archive collection. I believe this was a 2016 release. Is Susan Slept Here, which is a movie I have mixed feelings about because I love Debbie Reynolds. Look at her, she's adorable. But what the actual plot is really is just, you can not get away with it these days, nor would I think you really want to. It's very problematic. This has like the very weird kind of framework where this presents like the narration as coming from like an Oscar, like an Academy Award, is like narrating things from the beginning and kind of talking about like the Hollywood system and everything. But that is because he is home. His owner is a Academy Award winning screenwriter, played here by Dick Powell. And he's kind of struggling kind of with like writer's block. He's not really been churning out the best work recently until one day, right close to Christmas, I believe it's Christmas Eve or a few days before Christmas, a cop shows up at his door with a juvenile delinquent played by Debbie Reynolds. She is 17 years old, and the cop brings her here because he once like worked with this cop like on a movie set, and he always talked about how he wanted to write a juvenile delinquent picture, but he needed like someone who was actually a juvenile delinquent to kind of give him that inspiration. And the cop was like, okay, this girl, it's right before Christmas, I don't want her to have to spend Christmas in jail, so I'm going to take her to this writer's house so she can stay with him, but I'm going to make it very clear that she is underage and she is not to be touched, and we should be good. And despite protests from kind of both sides, the Dick Powell character, he doesn't really feel comfortable with this, and Debbie Reynolds' character certainly does not want to be in this strange man's house and just kind of very suspicious of him. But this kind of evolves, and I won't completely spoil where this goes, but there was either a path where I would have been more accepting of where this would go, or one where I was going to be very uncomfortable with where it went. The two paths were, one, he could be kind of like, this man, I will just say, the description on Wikipedia says he is 35, which there's a joke in this movie where he's like, says that he's 35, but he's kind of says it in a joking manner based on the context around there. I'm pretty sure he was joking, but Dick Powell was a clear, like, I looked it up, he was either 49 or 50 whenever he filmed this. So we'll just say he's a 50-year-old man with a 17-year-old girl. And they could either set it up so they eventually, like, they are a mismatched pair, they shouldn't be together, but, like, they have something that each of them need, and they will, like, aren't they good for each other? Which is so wild. Or they could take the path where Debbie Reynolds maybe gets a little bit confused and, like, becomes eventually charmed by this older man, but maybe eventually realizes that he is more of a paternalistic figure and could just, like, help her get her life back on track and just kind of have that kind of relationship. Which way they choose, I will not spoil, but just needless to say, this movie is something. But despite its many problematic elements, if I just set that aside and I try not to think about just how cringeworthy this dynamic is, it's a pretty fun movie, mostly because of Debbie Reynolds. She is very charming. She is very funny. And just the way this eventually plays out, the only reason it works is because Debbie Reynolds is here and she's just like lighting up the screen. Dick Powell is fine, but he is basically just like a statue for Debbie Reynolds to work around. But if you can get past the problematic natures, it's a fun-ish movie for its time. But today, it's whoa. But like I said, this comes from early in the Warner Archive run. I believe, like I said, I believe it was 2016. But this comes from a nice restoration that actually holds up very well, especially for kind of this earlier run for them. The colors are very well saturated, look very nice. The film grain is like maintained. There's been no DNR. I did not see any specks of damage or anything. So even early on, they were doing a very good job. And Susan Slept Here looks great and it sounds great. There are no special features besides the trailer. But if you're a fan of Debbie Reynolds, it's worth a watch. But just know what you're getting into. And with my final title, with all of these titles, you might have certain expectations for the Warner Archive, like what constitutes a Warner Archive title. And I'm here to kind of throw that off a little bit, because there are titles that they release that you might be surprised by. And that specifically for me is Young Sheldon Season 4. Now, Warner Archive has released most of the Young Sheldon seasons on Blu-ray. They released 2 through 5 on Blu-ray so far, and most of those I have covered on geekvibesnation.com. The first season, I believe, was released by Warner Home Video, but if not, it was also Warner Archive. The 6th season, I believe, is coming out soon. At the moment, it is listed as DVD only, but I really hope it does eventually get a Blu-ray release updated to the site. So fingers crossed for that one. But the reason like I said, this is one of the few seasons I have not covered for geekvibesnation.com, so I wanted to spotlight this one specifically, and it is a really great season of the show. So for those who don't know, Young Sheldon is a spinoff of The Big Bang Theory, which I had a hot and cold relationship with Big Bang Theory while I was on. It was very funny a lot of the time, but it did kind of start to get long in the tooth as it ran for seasons and seasons and became like a cultural behemoth, and it just kind of got a little bit annoying near the end, and people were understandably suspicious of a spinoff featuring a young Sheldon. While I understand that, I was right there with you. Young Sheldon has become one of my favorite family sitcoms. It is so heartfelt. It's a totally different thing from Big Bang Theory. If it was named anything else, I think it would get a lot more love than it does. It's very heartwarming, and it's really about these family dynamics. While yes, Sheldon is a young genius who kind of like drives his family crazy, but like they love him. This is more about the extended family. There's Mima, played by Annie Potts. There is like his brothers and sisters and his parents, and you get a lot of depth for all of them. And I really love how, especially after the first season, the show really grew into its own. And this 4th season is interesting because this is whenever Sheldon graduates high school and starts to actually go into college and starts really getting on that level where he can't be the smartest person in the room at all times once more, because he's used to being like against his like elementary students, and now he's in college, and kind of that adjustment is an interesting thing for Sheldon to wrestle with, and trying to make sure his emotional maturity is catching up with his intellectual maturity. And the things going on with like his siblings and his parents are also quite interesting. His brother is kind of getting himself into a situation that will pretty much forever change his life. His mom's kind of wrestling with her place in the world and how, like, what she wants to do with her career and everything is very interesting. Mima is in a new relationship that's like she's trying to figure out if she wants it to be serious or not. A lot of great stuff happening in here, but my main plea is like, with especially the strike going on and no new like scripted television really coming out, or it be coming out in drips and drops from like what was filmed before the strike, now's a really good time to catch up on Young Sheldon and like trust in me that I'm not leading you astray. This is a really cool, like fun family drama that's very heartfelt, very different from the energy of Big Bang Theory. I proselytize about Young Sheldon whenever I can. I think a lot of people give it a lot of grief whenever it's unearned. If they've actually watched beyond the first few episodes, which are a little bit kind of trying to trade on that Big Bang Theory energy, it settles into a groove pretty quickly that I think most like family-oriented audiences will enjoy. So Young Sheldon season 4, it's a really great release. Like I said, there's 2 discs, 8. This is the shortest season with 18 episodes, and spread over 2 discs. And with the length of these episodes, there's plenty of room for these to breathe. There's a very brief featurette that runs about 9 minutes. This was one of the seasons filmed during like the height of the COVID pandemic. So you get to kind of get some of the cast kind of reconnecting after kind of having to do stuff remotely for a while, kind of catching up with each other and like talking about the season and what they've been up to, everything else. So it's a brief featurette, but at least it's something. It could have been bare bones, so I'm glad they have that. So Young Sheldon season 4, it's a fun season of TV. All the seasons are fun. I recommend them all. If you need to sample the show, definitely do that. Give it a few episodes, but it's a really great show. It's one of my favorite family comedies, family sitcoms. So definitely recommend that. So my full slate of titles here for this Exploring the Warner Archive I will link to all of these in the description where you can buy these. I recommend our friends at MovieZing, but anywhere you can get them, make sure you pick them up. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you tell someone who also loves physical media, or just people who love movies and who you want to convince them the joys of physical media. I appreciate anyone who shares this around. Leave a comment. Let me know what film that you are most excited to check out. If there's ones that you've already seen, let me know what you thought of them. Let me know if you disagree with me. Maybe you don't think that certain movies were as good as I thought they were. But I think those are a pretty good slate. But I am going to keep doing this monthly. I'm going to keep getting these hidden gems from the Warner Archive that maybe you overlooked, maybe I think deserves a second chance. So I will see you again next month for this. But make sure you're subscribed for our other episodes on like with the main episodes of The Video Attic. I do other solo videos for different labels. We have some great interviews from some of my other colleagues with directors and everything. So we have a lot of great stuff on the channel. So stay tuned. Thank you for watching. But until next time, enjoy these movies.